So before we get to our guests this morning, I want to just give you a little quick snapshot of where the bill is and what the next steps are. So I forgot to ask the last class, did you guys watch the hearing where I testified?
Yeah. You did great.
And it was a good back and forth, I thought, with the committee. So your calls and emails worked. The bill moved out of committee on the 29th, was 3 days ago. It did get amended, and I think you might have heard that in the hearing. Senator Hunt said he was working on an amendment. So what they did is they narrowed the bill down to just the Temperance Day activities, the activities that the Secretary of State and the auditors will do, education, coming out to the schools, and getting kids to register to vote in their senior year. The 16-year-old provision was taken out, and Greg will speak primarily as to the reason that was taken out in just a minute. But so the bill went to the Ways and Means Committee. And if you remember, we talked about this before, the Ways and Means Committee is the fiscal committee. That means if the bill has any cost to it, it has to go to that committee before it can go to rules and to the floor. So that the bill has to move out of Ways and Means by next Tuesday. So the good news for us is that your senator, Senator Carlisle, sits on the Ways and Means Committee. So he can be very helpful in making sure that the bill gets brought up for hearing and gets moved. So today, over the weekend and Monday, but sooner rather than later, you need to be calling and emailing the Ways and Means members, and I will send that list to Mr. Fiza so you can make sure that you get that communication going. But again, Senator Carlisle can be very helpful since he is your senator, so hopefully that will be good. The bill moved out, if you want to pull up real quick the history, it moved out with all yes votes except for it had one no vote, and that was Senator Pearson, who, so when you pull up the minority report, remember, this is how you look. So Senator Pearson did not support it. I haven't talked to him about why, but I will go find out why he didn't support the bill. But everybody else voted for it. And so it's not scheduled for a hearing yet in Ways and Means, which is what we need to get to have happen next. So with that, that's where we are. I want to introduce our guest, which is Greg Lane. And before Greg was at the Secretary of State's office, he's the Deputy Secretary of State. Before he was in that position, he was at TVW. He ran TVW and actually deserves a lot of the credit because it was Greg that I worked with a couple other lobbyists to get this whole program started. So he oversaw the beginning of the Capitol Classroom. So we're very grateful for his leadership on that. Now a deputy at the Secretary of State's office, and he'll talk to us about their position on the bill. And I've kind of primed him with the first question, and that is why the Secretary of State's office was opposed to the notion of registering 16-year-olds to vote. And we'll start, you can introduce yourself and then go with that.
Good morning, how are you guys?
Good.
Good. Hey, congratulations on being part of Capitol Classroom. Vicki mentioned it was her idea that she came to us and started this program, and we were thrilled to get it going. And we started out, I think, the first year with 2 classes. Yep. So this year, I've learned they have 17. So that is just awesome, the way it has expanded to get you guys engaged. And the whole idea is to teach you how the legislative process works and how you can influence that process from participating. And hopefully, I would encourage all of you as you graduate high school and move on, don't let this be your only experience with the legislature. It's not just about voting. As you've learned, you can have an influence in the laws that get passed in the state. So now that you've learned how the process works, I hope that you'll stay engaged as you move off onto college and further in the process so that you can have an impact on the laws that are passed that regulate what you can and can't do. Mm-hmm. In terms of our position on this bill, we signed in opposition, and it was primarily a concern not necessarily with the policy, but logistically how it would work. And the challenge that we have in the Secretary of State's office and each of the county auditors' offices who would actually be taking these applications is that the system that we use, the software, the computer system that we use is pretty old. It's about 15 years old. And there's no way for it to accommodate these types of signups. And so our concern was the process that would take place in managing these signups, and that there wouldn't be enough security around ensuring that that they're not treated the same way as normal voter registrations for folks who are actually eligible to vote, and that those databases had the potential under the current system of being mixed, and that folks who were not 18 aren't actually eligible to vote might in some cases get ballots. And so we didn't want that to happen. We actually have a proposal in front of the legislature this year asking for funding to create a whole new voter registration and election management system in the Secretary of State's office. And so, and our hope is that once we get that system up and running, that it will be able to accommodate policy changes like this and others that the legislature is considering. Mm-hmm. At that point, if we can get that system funded and built and in place, I think we'll be much more willing to, and I guess comfortable with policy changes like this and being able to implement them in a way that they're intended without any unforeseen consequences. So that was our concern with the bill, and frankly, we're really excited about where it is headed because it's alleviated some of those concerns, and we have always been extremely supportive of the provisions of going in and actively engaging with students, teaching them about elections, getting them registered to vote, so that they're, once they become eligible, they can participate and will participate. We want much more voter participation across all boards.
Yep. So the Secretary of State's office is now supporting the bill, right? And can you tell us what the appropriation, the money you're asking for, how much are you asking for, and has it been included in any of the budgets so far?
This is a project we've been working on for about 3 years, coordinated with all the county auditors, and so we put in a budget request. It's $5.8 million that we were asking for. Our office is actually kicking in about $3.6 million, so the total project is just under $10 million. It was in the governor's budget way back, his proposal way back in December. It also was in the Senate's budget proposal that was released a couple weeks ago. It is not, however, in the House budget that was just released this week. So, we are actively working that process to hopefully get the House comfortable with it, and the final budget proposal, when that comes out, that it will include the project. So one thing you can do, and Vicki can talk more specifically about this, is get in touch with legislators in the House and encourage them to put the money in the budget to fund this proposal, this system, because it would be a step then toward getting to the policy that you guys are supporting and want to have implemented.
Exactly. So if the new system can be funded and they can start working on building that, then we could come back next year or the year after and pass the bill that would allow 16-year-olds to register to vote because this new software system would be in place. So step 2 in our advocacy now is to help get the House members to support funding for this proposal in the final budget when they negotiate that. Okay.
I just add, I understand that you're probably disappointed that the 16-year-old sign-up piece isn't included, but you also be excited about moving a step closer. Oftentimes in the legislature, to get to the policy change that you ultimately want to make, you need to do it in incremental steps over a number of years. And this is a step in the right direction. It also, if we can implement it and roll it out and be able to demonstrate success, that we're getting more folks to sign up, that our seniors in high school and engaging folks and helping them understand the process, being successful in that civic education, we can go back to the legislature and say, this is really successful, help us take the next step. Mm-hmm. And legislators who might be a little uncomfortable with some of the policy change right now, we might be able to influence to get to be supportive later on down the road. So these little steps are important, so you might have a little disappointment with not getting the whole thing now, but that doesn't mean that eventually we can't get there.
Right. Okay, we have time for a few questions, either for Greg in the Secretary of State's office or for me on the process. Yeah, right here in front.
So I know a lot of seniors are planning to leave state for college that next year. So is it really worth it for us to register to vote in Washington if we're leaving?
Absolutely. So you can register here, and then you can either, when you go off to college, if you go off to another state, we can transfer your registration if you want to register to be voted in that state, or you can maintain because you're not a permanent resident of that state yet, you can maintain your registration to vote here in Washington. And we can either forward that ballot to you where you're located, if you let your local county auditor know that, or if you have it mailed to your home, your parents can get it to you and you can vote. I've got 2 kids in college. That's exactly what we do. The ballot comes to our address. I have one who's in Chicago. I mail it off to him. He votes and sends it back to the auditor here in Washington. So the most important part is to get you registered, get you into the system, and then that registration will follow you throughout wherever you end up relocating at college or beyond.
Yep.
Yeah.
Other questions? Greg, you pick. I can't.
Let's go with the young lady with the blue scarf.
So are hearings in the Ways and Means Committee different than in the regular committee?
That's a fantastic question. Yes, that's a really good question. So in the Ways and Means Committee, they are only discussing whether or not the cost of the bill is appropriate. So the Policy Committee has already said, this is a good policy, we want to move forward with this. The Ways and Means Committee then considers, is the money, and I can't remember I was trying to remember the number. I know you guys have the fiscal note, we talked about it before. Whether that's an appropriate expense for the state. So when you work on your talking points the rest of today and over the weekend, that's something you need to think about when you call them. Not just is it a good policy, but is it worth it to spend the money on it? That's a very good question. Others? There's one way in the back there. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So is there any other states that do this?
Temperance Day?
There's no other states that we know of that focus specifically on Temperance Day. There are certainly other states that do civic education in schools around elections. There are no other states that I'm aware of that sign up 16-year-olds. They have. There are states that do pre-registration like we do currently, where you have to be 18 before the next election to sign up. But I don't think there's any other states that allow 60-year-old signups that we talked about. So this was pretty cutting edge stuff, which is great. We're always looking for new ways to increase access. And just from our point of view at the Secretary of State's office, the way that we approach evaluating the benefits of policy changes like this is we always look at, yes, we want to increase access and engagement and participation as much as possible, but at the same time, we have to weigh the risk toward security of the system and potential fraud that could take place. So in this case, because our computer system, our registration system isn't set up to allow it, we felt like that there was just a little too much risk to take that policy change right now. Hopefully, if we can get the new system in place, that'll help mitigate some of that risk, and we'll be much more comfortable with supporting the policy. But that's how we look at all these different issues, trying to weigh the benefits of increasing access and participation with the potential risk to security or how someone might be able to manipulate it. Or in this case, our concern more is that just mistakes might happen and those databases get mixed and ballots get sent out that shouldn't get sent out.
Other questions? The hat in the front.
Yeah.
So after the amendment that was applied to 1513, is it now that only 17-year-olds who are going to be 18 by the next election will vote, or is it any 17-year-old?
Go ahead.
It would be 17-year-olds who would be eligible to vote by the next election. So you'd have to be turned 18. But, that's the vast majority of seniors in high school. So, we'll manage that as we go out and roll out the process and talk to classes. But, the classes, when we go out into classes, the focus will be on teaching them about participating in elections and then getting them signed up. We'll bring registration forms. We'll have computers available to do online registration. There's many ways you can register to vote. We'll make it as easy and encourage everybody who's eligible in those classes to get signed up.
I think we have time for one more question. Saw a hand behind. Yeah. Back in the back.
So what happens if it doesn't pass the Ways and Means Committee, or like if the budget is changed at all? What's the next step?
So if the bill doesn't pass the Ways and Means Committee, then it will die for this year. So we really need to get it to move out of Ways and Means Committee. As far as the budget request that the Secretary of State's office has, the legislature can say, well, you know what, we're only going to give you $2 million of your $5.8 million you requested. And then their office has to deal with how do you figure out how to build a system with less money than you really know it's going to cost. So I think two things. We need to make sure the Ways and Means Committee passes the bill out, but we also need to make sure they get the appropriate funding for the system, because we want to be able to come back later. We want a robust system We want to be able to come back later and say, now we want you to, now that you have this good system, now we want to figure out a way to get 16-year-olds into some sort of database so that they can be registered when they become 18. So I think it's really important that we advocate on that, because if those things don't happen, it's going to be that much harder for these things to be done in the future.
And for you guys specifically, you know, we're not changing the policy, the state law to allow people from 16 to sign up, but you're now very aware of what the rule is. And for those of you, you know, who are eligible to sign up now, I hope you're doing that. You can do it very easily by going to the Secretary of State's website and clicking on register to vote and getting signed up. You can, I mean, there's many ways to do it. You can do it at the local vehicle license office. You go in and register that way. So you guys now are aware of it, and I hope you're excited about participating, and you'll make sure that you're registered to vote when soon as you're eligible.
So let's say thank you to Greg for taking time today to come and talk to you guys.
Thank you.
And I will send you an email with who I want you to get in touch with, and we'll be in touch in the next couple of days. I'll let you know what happens. Have a good weekend.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.